If your black fur keeps looking flat, it's usually not because you need a darker black. It's usually because black fur needs structure, variation and controlled layering far more than we realise. So in this video I'm focusing just on the ear because this is actually one of the best places to learn how Black Labrador fur works. It teaches us how to handle dark values, the sheen, the short sleek fur and those colour shifts that make the black fur look real. So in this lesson I'm just focusing on the ear because although it's a small area, it contains most of the things that make black fur tricky. You've got the fold of the ear, the deepest darks, the softer reflected light, the smooth direction of the coat, and also some warmth and coolness that sit together. And that's exactly why it's such a useful study. A Labrador's ear is obviously not fluffy or feathery. The fur is short, it's sleek and it's close to the shape, the form. So the realism comes much more from getting the values, the transitions and the surface right, rather than putting in lots of obvious hair details. So rather than thinking lots of little hairs, I'm just thinking sort of shape, structure and the reflection at the minute. If you'd like to follow the full real-time version of the lesson, you can find the complete tutorial over on my Patreon along with my other tutorials and studies as well. But the first thing I do is map in the darkest darks with black. Now the reason I do this first is because I want to establish the structure of the ear before I get distracted by the lighter areas. Those darks tell me where the fold is, where the ear's turning away from the light and where the deepest shadow needs to sit, but I'm not pressing hard. That's important because at this stage the black's not there to finish the drawing, it's there to sort of map out for me, to place those sort of anchor points. If you press too hard too early, you'll flatten the tooth of the paper. So I just use the black lightly and intentionally, just enough to sort of mark out those deepest areas. One of the biggest issues with black fur is using just black throughout. With a lab, especially one outdoors, the coat nearly always reflects more than just its base fur. So you'll often see those blue greys from the sky, greys where the light catches the surface, and also even sort of soft warm browns in those transitional areas. So once I'd mapped those deepest darks, I brought in the 181 Pit Pastel because that pencil is just brilliant for dark fur, for black fur. The reason it works so well is that it gives you a cool dark base without making everything too heavy too soon. It really helps create depth, but it still leaves room for the drawing to develop, and that's really the key. You don't want a block, you want a family of colours all working together. So for me that tends to be black for the deepest parts, 181 for the cooler structure, soft greys, blue greys where the sheen is sitting, and a gentle glaze later on just to enrich it. So that's a lovely combination and it just feels a bit more natural on a Labrador. So once those first darker layers are in, I then think much more about obviously the shape of the ear. It's one of the most important parts because the fur is lying over a shape, and with Labradors, because the coat is so short, that shape really shows through. So I'm always sort of asking myself, where does the ear curve, where does it fold, where does it come slightly forward, where does it drop back, and that tells me where the values need to change. And that's why I always say with black fur, structure matters more than the detail at first. So that's where I build. Once the structure starts to make sense to me, I then begin adding the lighter tones where that sheen moves across the ear. This is usually where we can get a bit nervous because the ear starts to look to go grey, But the important thing to remember is that the ear is still black. The lighter pencil's not changing that. It's just sort of, you know, placing how the light will sit on that surface, if you like. So the sheen is usually quite soft. It's not bright. It's not bright white highlight. It's more of a muted cool grey or a blue grey. So it needs to stay subtle. So the technique then is really about pressure and placement. I don't want hard stripes. I don't want thick sort of pale patches. I just want to try and get a soft, controlled sort of shift in value that follows the shape of the ear, and that's why I try to keep the pressure light and let that lighter pencil gradually sit on top. Another really important point with Black Labrador ears is the fur direction. So yeah, the direction matters, of course it does, but I'm not trying to draw every single hair. That's the difference, because Labrador fur on the ear is very short and it's smooth. So if we go in too soon with loads of sharp little strokes, it can then start to look a little bit dry rather than sleek. So instead I try to use my marks to just suggest the direction of the coat while still keeping that softness in the surface. So if the fur is curving over the ear, my marks need to support that curve. If the ear is turning away, the marks need to help that area recede as well. So the goal isn't detail for the sake of detail, it's using those marks to sort of strengthen the shape. Okay, and going back to the warmth, again, even though Black Labradors often carry a lot of that cool reflection, especially outdoors, there's still tiny hints of warmth in the ear, and that sometimes comes from the skin, sometimes from the environment, sometimes it's just a subtle transition that you might see in the reference photo. So I might add a very gentle warm brown or a warm grey in small areas, not enough to make the ear look brown, just enough to stop it from feeling too cold. That's often, what can make black fur feel richer as well. Not just the dark and the light, it's, cool against warmth as well, building those relationships. And then toward the end, I go back in and refine the drawing by reinforcing those darks. Not everywhere, just where the ear needs more depth. That might be in the fold, in the tucked back shadow, or in the darkest sort of turning areas. And the reason I leave some of that until later is because by then I can judge it more accurately, just against those lighter tones that I've already built. That's when the contrast really starts to make sense. And then if I need to, I then glaze with something like indigo or a purple violet to enrich those black areas further. Again, not to make it look obviously blue or purple, but to give it the darks the extra depth those Black Labradors often have in outdoor light. Those glazes though can be really effective because they unify in the layers underneath, and they add the richness, all without covering up all the work that you've already done, but light layers. So the main things to take away from the ear study is start with the darkest darks to establish the structure. Use black, not the whole as a whole answer, but just to map in. Bring in those cooler darks like the 181 to create depth. Treat the lighter areas as reflected light, not as a change in the dog's colour. Keep the sheen soft and controlled. Follow the fur direction without overdoing the texture, and use those tiny cool and warm shifts to make the fur feel more natural. That's what helps a Black Labrador ear look soft, sleek, rather than flat or overworked. Okay, so, and if you'd like to work through the full real-time version with me, you can find the complete tutorial over on my Patreon at Wildlife Art by Claire, along with more tutorial studies and resources as I build the library. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being here, and I really hope this helps when you come to draw your own Black Labrador. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.